Okay, so this session is now being recorded. The recording and chat are public records and will go on the LCB webpage at lcb.wa.gov later this week or early next week. So give me one moment to share my PowerPoint slide with you all. Okay, hoping you all can see that. So today's topic is the outdoor alcohol service areas and food service menu requirements portion of the House Bill 1480 conceptual draft rules. Our overall meeting goal today is to engage with our industry partners and other interested partners to review the conceptual draft rules, elicit feedback in a structured fashion, and discuss next steps. So why are we here? In addition to creating the temporary alcohol to-go endorsements, to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, House Bill 1480 also requires the LCB to create temporary rules to allow for outdoor service of alcohol by certain on-premises licensees and consider revising our rules in order to provide greater flexibility regarding licensee food service menu requirements. So for some background, the LCB is currently in the CR 101 inquiry phase of the rulemaking process to implement House Bill 1480. A previous listen and learn session was held on August 5th regarding the alcohol to go endorsements, and your feedback during today's forum will help inform and shape these rules going forward. So let me spend just a minute here talking about meeting protocol and participant roles. So my role today is facilitator, and I'll be helping guide folks through the conceptual draft rules. LCB staff on the line might jump in to help assist with questions. If you have any technical difficulties, you can also put that in the chat, and we will try and assist you with that. The participants, all of you who are in attendance, thank you for being here. We will be using the hand raise feature as we go through to elicit feedback. If you have trouble with your microphone, please do put your comment in the chat. If you can, plug in an external headphone with a mic on it and see if that resolves the issue as well. So here are some participation expectations for today. Please stay on topic. The topic for today is just the outdoor alcohol service areas and the food service menu requirements. If you have other topics you want to discuss about House Bill 1480, please feel free to email me, schedule time outside of this meeting, and we can cover those questions then. So everyone is encouraged to participate. Please maintain a respectful space, listen to and respect other points of view. And when you speak, please do state your name and where you're from. That'll help us when we go back later and are analyzing these comments. So everyone will have an opportunity to speak. You don't need to donate your time to another person. And since this is a public forum, again, anything shared has the potential to become part of a public record. So here's how the meeting format will work today. I'll introduce the topic as outlined in the agenda, and then if we can identify the order that the hands are raised, we'll call on you in that order using the virtual hand raise feature. If you're having trouble with the hand raise, go ahead and put something in the chat and we can try and call on you that way also. So please be prepared to speak about what you like, don't like, and offer alternative language for each rule section. So I'm going to take just a minute and pause here, and if folks could please put in the chat box your name, who you're affiliated with or represent if you're comfortable sharing, and maybe a little bit why you're interested in this topic. And since Microsoft Teams doesn't have a pre-registration, the information you put in the chat will help us be able to follow up with you later if you had a question. So please do go ahead and put your name in there, who you're affiliated with, and a little bit about why you're interested in this topic. And for those of you who might be looking for the chat box, there should be a little bubble that looks like a comment circle up at the top if you're on the app or if you're on the the web browser, I know it looks a little bit different. It should be in the center of your screen. So thanks. I see some some introductions starting to come in. Appreciate that. Okay, so as those are coming in, I will just move along to a brief overview of the rulemaking process before we jump into the review of the conceptual draft rules. So there are three basic phases to the rulemaking process: the inquiry phase or CR101 phase, the proposal phase, the CR102 phase, and the adoption phase or the CR103 phase. We are currently, with House Bill 1480 rules, we're currently in this inquiry phase or CR101 phase where we're doing stakeholder engagement, both previously with the comment period that was open and now with the listen and learn sessions, and we're doing rule development, drafting, and analysis. Here's a flow chart that kind of outlines the process that it goes through. Again, we're right here in this stakeholder engagement, rule development, and drafting phase, and our next step will be to go to the rule proposal. So the feedback we get today will help us shape that rule proposal. So I won't read through all of this now, but these slides will be available up on our webpage later. I think I've already explained what's in the CR101 phase, so I'll jump to the CR102. So after today's meeting, we'll gather all the feedback, put it into a table, respond to comments, and revise our rules, consider revising our rules based on the feedback we get. After that, we'll draft a proposed rulemaking order consistent with the APA requirements, file a formal CR102, and a formal review period and comment process will begin. This is where the board will hold a public hearing and public can sign up to provide oral testimony. This is also where the CR102 will include Regulatory Fairness Act analysis and other types of required analysis. So phase 3 of the process, or the adoption phase, after that formal public hearing and review period, the agency will compile all the comments we receive and again review the rules and decide whether we should make any changes or adopt them as proposed. If substantive changes are made, we'll have to go back and file another CR102 and hold a second public hearing. Otherwise, if we adopt the rules as proposed, the rules will become effective 31 days later. So here's an estimated rulemaking timeline for this project. In green here are the steps we've already taken: filing the CR101, having an initial comment period, holding the first listen and learn session. And down here is where we're at currently, having our second listen and learn. And these are just some estimated timelines. We are currently on target to have a rule proposal ready by the end of this month. We'll ask the board for approval to file those proposed rules. If filed on September 29th, then the public hearing would be on November 10th. And if these dates are hit, that means that we are looking at adoption of the final rules in November with an effective date in December. Okay, so let me pull back up our agenda here, and thanks everyone for continuing to introduce yourself in the chat bar. So we're ready now to turn to this portion of the agenda where we review the conceptual draft rules. So just a quick look ahead, we'll spend around 70 minutes or up to 70 minutes, could be less depending on the amount of feedback we get, discussing the temporary rules for the outdoor alcohol service areas. We'll take a short break, and then we will come back and look at the food service menu requirements section by section. So we are a bit ahead of schedule now. It's 1:15, so just keep that in mind, and I will open up the rules. So this section on the slide, just to back up a little bit, just describes what 1480 requires in terms of what the board has to do to revise our current rules with the alcohol service areas and the food service menu requirements. So something you can refer to later if you're going back to the slides. Okay, so I will pull up our first section here. So again, please state what you like, what you don't like, and any suggested revisions. And also, if you could state your name and where you're from or who you're affiliated with, if you feel comfortable before you give your comment, we would appreciate that. So we will begin with this WAC 314-03-200, outside or extended alcohol service. So this is an existing rule section that we are adding this new underlined language to accommodate the new temporary requirements from 1480. So except as provided in the temporary rules for outdoor alcohol service in WAC 314-03-205 that are effective until July 1, 2023, the following conditions must be met. So we're not changing anything else in this WAC other than just including a reference to our new temporary WAC. So if folks have any comments, feedback, what you like, don't like, please go ahead and raise your hand or put that in the chat. So I think that this is pretty self-explanatory because it's not really adding anything new, so not anticipating too much on that. But so I'll scroll ahead, but if you do have something about that language that you want to share, please do raise your hand. But that's the only thing we're changing in this existing rule section. And this is our new draft section, temporary rules for outdoor alcohol service by on-premises licensees. So the subsection 1, we'll just go through it subsection by subsection, referencing House Bill 1480, including a reference in there that authorizes this change, stating that these rules are effective until July 1, 2023, unless they're extended by the legislature, and stating that they create a temporary exception to the requirements in the WAC we just took a look at, the current outdoor rules. And these rules apply to all on-premises licensees. So if you have feedback on this section, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Jeff, are you seeing anything in the chat or any hands raised? I'm not currently seeing anything.
No, I'm not seeing anything either.
Okay, so we'll move on to the second subsection then. So for ongoing outdoor alcohol service located in privately owned spaces, a licensee must request approval from the board's licensing division and meet the following requirements. So this is the subsection that starts outlining the requirements for private spaces. There's a separate section below for the public spaces, so like the sidewalk cafes are in their own subsection. But we'll start with subsection 2, which is for the privately owned spaces. So A says the licensee must have legal authority to use outdoor alcohol service area, including but not limited to ownership or leasehold rights. Does anyone have feedback, what you like, don't like? Please go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, now I'm not seeing anything right now, so I will move to the next subsection B, and if we're going too quickly, please in the chat, we can come back to this later if there's time and you have feedback on this. But Sub B says the licensee must have a building with indoor dining capacity in order to qualify for an outdoor alcohol service area. Building is defined in WAC 31407.010, so that's an existing WAC. Building must have floor to ceiling walls and a roof and must comply with state and local building codes. I think I see one hand raised. Jeff, were you able to find that the person who had their hand raised? I looked like a call-in user. I tried to unmute you. You should be able to speak if you don't mind saying your name and um,
Hello, this is Ken Rogers. Are you able to hear me?
yes, we can hear you, Ken.
Thank you. Question on the previous topic you're on. I apologize for going backwards. A clarification on the public versus private portion of that language. And when it references leasehold rights, my question is relative to if a property or if a licensee is leasing from a public entity, for example, leasing space from a city, for example, is that included in that language?
Thanks for that question, Ken. Um, so I'd have to know more about that individual situation, and maybe that's something licensing can assist with too. But the public spaces section is intended to be for like the sidewalk cafe locations. So let me, it looks like licensing staff might be about to jump in. So let me unmute one of them and see if they're able to provide you with a more answer there, better answer. One moment. Okay, John, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay, so yes, that is what this is addressing. Either leasehold rights or permission from the local municipality in the case of a public right-of-way.
So that's not a change from the existing rule then?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that question, Ken, and thanks, John. So we'll go back to sub B here about the licensee must have a building with indoor dining capacity. Does anyone else have feedback on this subsection?
Hi, Audrey. I see one person with their hand up. It's Roger. So I will try to unmute you now. Okay, Roger, go ahead.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Roger Rezelbeck from Southwest Washington. I have a winery, and it appears this section is devoted to restaurants that have a liquor license, and you're talking about dining capacities. Does this section also apply to wineries with tasting rooms? Because that's not clear.
Thanks for that question, Roger. So this entire section is rules applicable to all on-premises licensees. So just as the current outdoor alcohol service area rules would apply to all licensees that are requesting that privilege of having the outdoor areas, this would similarly apply.
Okay, I understand. I can see that statement, but when you refer to dining capacity, you're referring to an eating establishment. Wineries do not necessarily have eating they're not eating establishments, they're wine tasting areas. Perhaps you should add indoor dining or tasting capacity.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. I'll make a note of that. And yeah, you're right, that's something it doesn't currently say, or tasting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else with their hand up, Jeff?
Yes, I see that Josh McDonald has his hand up. Oh, I think he just took his hand down. Okay, let me open your mic, Josh. Okay, Josh, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Josh McDonald, Washington Wine Institute. On this, I guess, my question is, I don't quite understand why there's a restriction here requiring indoor dining capacity to qualify for outdoor alcohol service. There's creative business models out there, or there will be in the future, that may be able to utilize the outdoor space completely and not actually functionally seat anyone indoors, but still be a building and still do service out of that building. So could you help me understand where this came from, and if we'd like to just put you on record as wanting to further engage on any potential changes to this section.
Thanks, Josh, for that feedback. This is supposed to line up with the existing rules and policies that have been in place for outdoor dining, although it wasn't explicitly in the rules before. And if you have suggestions for how to change this, we'd welcome that feedback. Suggestions for how to revise this, or maybe in this case, it sounds like you'd rather see it removed.
No, well, I think I'm sorry, I don't know if you can still hear me, so I'm just going to talk.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can. I think there are definitely ways to work on this together. So I would say, just want to be on record that we want to continue to engage with you on maybe ways to talk about how to achieve what you're hoping to achieve here, but also not stifle or unnecessarily curtail any potential future or current business models that are out there for outdoor dining and alcohol service.
Thanks, Josh. We appreciate that. So if you have suggestions for that, I can follow up with you later, or feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll consider whatever comments folks have on how to improve this.
Great. Thanks, Audrey.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Are there any other hands up, Jeff?
I just have another brief comment to follow up on Josh's comment. When our winery first started several years ago, we were in the development stages of our wine tasting room, so we did not have an indoor facility. We were outside in a tent, obviously during reasonable weather, but that's how we operated for a couple of years. And this would seem to preclude that. So I would definitely be in favor of revising it in a way, or if it's available to licensed premises. We had the premises approved by federal and state authorities, but we were not inside. We did not have indoor capacity at that point, simply because we were under development.
Thanks for sharing that background there, Roger. That's helpful.
Okay.
And did you have anything else you wanted to add? I see your hand still up. Okay. Are there any other hands up that I'm missing, Jeff?
Hi, Audrey. Yes, I think that Thomas Carpenter has a comment, so I will unmute him now. Okay, Thomas, go ahead.
Hi there, this is Thomas Carpenter up in Colville, Washington. I apologize, I was a little bit late to the meeting, got wrapped up in another project. But I just wanted, it sounds like we have several similar examples of what had been tried to do, and this particular portion of the rules had stopped business activity, including mine. I have a downtown city lot that my intent was to build a bathroom, a storage building, and an alcohol and food service shack building. Essentially, it's a shack, but it is a four-walled building enclosed with a serving window. And then the rest of the lot was intended to just simply be seating, cornhole, activity space. And then in the front of that lot, have the ability to have food trucks rent that space and provide additional food services, which is kind of irrelevant to the alcohol license purpose, but is kind of part of the business model. And I wasn't able to go forward with acquiring an alcohol license because I had no indoor seating at all, and that kind of put the kibosh on me even building a building.
Thanks for that feedback, Thomas. Are there any suggestions you have in this case for revising this, or?
Well, and so what I would like to see is either hard requirements, because what I wasn't able to garner from the Liquor Control Board is, I asked, well, how many seats do I have to have, or what is the minimum requirement to, if I put in an extension on the service building and said this is our indoor seating, how can I meet the letter of the law when during the pandemic I'm just trying to provide a service to people in an outside safe environment, where creating a building is counterproductive towards that, or having the indoor seating even available is counterproductive towards that purpose. And so what I would like to see is kind of essentially loosening the requirements of what needs to exist for a beer garden, because essentially that's all it was, is with a long-standing environment instead of a pop-up environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. You'd like to see some hard requirements, sounds like some sort of minimums in there. And if you have suggestions for what those might be specifically, feel free to either let us know now or email us and put it in the chat too, and we'll consider those.
And during my application process, we had a fair amount of back and forth. I'd sent a proposal of what my intent was, and I'd be happy to resend all of that, because I think we met all of any of the safety requirements and all of the security protocols as far as entrances and exits. It was just a matter of I think where we qualified for everything to be a snack bar, except for primary income couldn't be alcohol service, because I also own a bowling alley and we operate under a snack bar license. And so I thought that we were going to be able to operate as a snack bar, and it came back that, oh, well, you have to have another primary revenue stream, and there just wasn't one. And so if we loosened up the guidelines for snack bar license, that would also meet the intents for me to operate my business plan.
Okay. Well, thank you for that feedback. We will turn to the next person with their hand up now. Looks like we have 3 or 4 more people. So I think on my screen, it looks like we have Annie McGrath. So I will go ahead and allow your microphone, Annie. So you should be able to unmute now.
Great. Hey, hi, Audrey and everybody. Thank you for hosting this one again today. I just want to echo Josh's comments and some of the comments before me and say that the Washington Brewers Guild, we're really interested in working with you on language to refine this particular section, and that for breweries and other producers, sometimes space is at a premium, and because we are producing on site and that can really take up a lot of a smaller space, we'd like to see a little bit more flexibility here with regards to allowing for some outdoor dining when there isn't that space availability inside, or even in, as we've seen in the last year, the outdoor dining concept has become really popular, especially with a lot of our breweries, and we found that consumers really like it. And I think there will be some interest in some new models where maybe we're not seeing people physically sitting indoors, but we have these beautiful outdoor spaces that people have invested in over the last year and a half. So we're happy to work with you guys on this and just wanted to go on the record of our interest there. So thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Okay, so next it looks like we have Emily Gantt. So I will go ahead and allow your microphone, Emily, and you should be able to unmute now. So Emily, it looks like you're still muted if you are talking, but you should have the ability to unmute yourself. Okay, if you're having trouble with that, please put something in the chat and we'll come back to you. I see there's one more person with their hand up, Jamie. So I will go ahead and allow your mic and you should be able to unmute yourself now, Jamie. So Jamie, maybe you're having the same issue Emily put in the chat. She's not able to unmute herself, and but you're both currently on my end. It looks like you should have the option to unmute yourself. So if you're having trouble too, okay, so you're both having trouble there. Jeff, are you able to help troubleshoot?
Yeah, I'm trying, but it doesn't appear to be successful. It appears that they are unmuted on my end.
Okay, so if it's an issue with maybe your external microphone, I recommend trying to plug in a headset or something like that. That might help, a headset with a microphone, and we can come back to both of you here, or feel free to put your comment in the chat. Another thing you could try for anyone who has this issue is maybe log out, log back in, and see if that helps. So I apologize for those technical difficulties, but Jeff, if they've put stuff in the chat that we can read out loud, are there questions in there or comments?
There aren't any questions there yet, but I will continue to monitor it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'm sorry about that. We will move on to sub C here. Okay, I think I did just see a comment come in. Jeff, can you read that one out loud? It was about the previous subsection.
Okay, yes, I see it here. It's from Jamie, and Jamie says, I want to reiterate allowing for outdoor dining without indoor as we use our indoor space for production.
Okay, thank you, Jamie, for that feedback. All right, so for anyone who has feedback on this next subsection C, it says the outdoor alcohol service area must be contiguous to the licensed business or located on the same property or parcel of land as the licensed business. If you have any feedback or comments on that, what you like, dislike, please go ahead and raise your hand or put it in the chat. Okay, on my end, it looks like I see Thomas Carpenter, your hand's up again, so you should have the ability to unmute yourself still, so go ahead.
Hi there. Yeah, I mean, just kind of the same. If this subsection was modified, I would be able to operate my offsite project under the bowling alley license, and so it kind of just a different way to skin that same cat. So if we were to amend it to state that it does not have to be contiguous to the licensed business, or that we allow separate property parcels, then I would be happy.
Okay, thanks for that feedback, Thomas. Right, so yes, the second sub little 2, II, located on the same property or parcel. So you'd like to see those both change, because right now it's an or. It can either be contiguous or it can be located on the same property or parcel.
Correct, and I'm separated by several blocks.
Okay. Okay, got it.
Not same parcel or connected.
Okay. Well, thanks for that feedback then. I'll make a note of that.
Thank you.
And is there anyone else that has feedback on this portion? Jamie, I see your hand still up. I'm not sure if that was from before or sorry, you're probably still having the same mic issue, so feel free to put that in the comment if you have another piece of feedback on this section. I'm not seeing anyone else with their hand currently up. Jeff, is there anything in the chat we can read out on this section?
The only thing is Jamie said I'm fine, thank you. So I don't think Jamie has a question now.
Okay, got it. All right, so we'll move to the next subsection then, D. The outdoor alcohol service area must have an attendant, wait staff, or server dedicated to the area when patrons are present. That's the entirety of that one. Does anyone have feedback on this? Okay, I see Sean Walker. Let me allow your microphone, so you should have the option to unmute yourself, Sean.
Just a quick question. If that outdoor adjacent area is literally adjacent and visible from the main area, does it need a separate, let's say it's 15 feet away, right, from the main service area, does it need a separate attendant if it's fully visible?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Sean. My understanding is this is something that was in the existing rule as well, so not a change. Attendant, wait staff, or server dedicated to the area. So, is this something licensing you might have input on at all?
I don't have the rules open right in front of me right now, but one way or another, this has always been standard practice, you know, and obviously the idea is that you don't have an area that is completely out of sight and disconnected from the premises.
Right.
With no observation going on.
Okay.
And in your case that you describe, I probably need a diagram, which is usually how we work these things out.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Sean and John, for your input there. And there is, the next section is sort of similar, Sean, and maybe this is where your question was coming from, but sub E says interior access to the licensed premises from the outdoor alcohol service area is not required. However, unless there is interior access to the licensed premises from the outdoor alcohol service area or an unobstructed direct line of sight from inside the licensed premises to the outdoor alcohol service area, an employee with a mask permit must be present in that area when patrons are present in order to monitor that alcohol consumption. So that's a connected requirement. I see we do have another hand up, but I wanted to just see if you had, does this kind of get to your question at all, Sean, or?
Yeah, it does. That's what we've been going under. So that they have to have full sight. Otherwise, if it's anywhere that's out of sight, it has to be staffed. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and I see we have Russ Heaton with their hand up. So let me unmute you or allow your microphone, and you should have the option to unmute now, Russ.
Yes. Would a video camera be a supportive agent, or do I have to have a person actually out there 100% of the time? Meaning that if they run into bus tables, or if they run in a drink order, or to pick up a drink order, or to pick up food, does there have to be somebody there 100% of the time, or will a video camera into the space allow for a substitute?
So if we're talking about subsection D, this was the requirement that the area have an attendant, wait staff, or server dedicated to that area when patrons are present. You know, that someone has to be dedicated to that area when they're there. It doesn't mean they have to be there 100% of the time.
Okay.
But in terms of this next subsection E, if you don't have that interior access, the rule is giving options here. So it would depend again on your situation. Do you have interior access or not? And then
I have interior access, but there's not a direct line of sight.
Okay.
So we've put a security camera in the tent so that when we leave the space, there's eyes on that space from bartenders behind the bar. There's a monitor behind the bar. When people are, transitioning between space and in terms of running drinks, bussing tables, and food.
Right. So the rules don't speak to, security cameras or no security cameras. So I think, that would be a business decision for folks.
Okay.
But,
well, that makes it fair. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that question. And I saw one more, I think, come in the chat. Jeff, are you able to read that one out?
Yes, I will read it here. Let's see. This is from Jenny. Wanting to confirm, this does not apply to temporary one-time event requests when we expand our service area for special events, as well as our beer garden. That's a question.
Yeah, correct. These rules here are for the ongoing service, so not the one-time event. And I hope that answered. Great. Okay, Jenny says that answers her question. So I see we have one more hand up, and if I could ask folks to also remember, if you have feedback, to state your name and where you're from, and then also to try and focus your feedback on what you like or don't like about the section and suggest changes. That would be helpful. So let me go ahead and unmute. We have a dial-in caller. Okay, you should be able to unmute yourself. I think this was the same dial-in caller we had before. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting what your name was, but if you should be able to mute and unmute yourself. Okay. If you're able to put your question in the chat, please do so. Or if you're on the phone and you don't have access to the chat, you can also send us an email at rules@lcb.wa.gov, and we can try and read out your question too. So apologies if you're having technical difficulties there. So is there any other feedback that anyone has, what they like, what they don't like, what they want to see changed with the sub E, the interior access to the licensed premises is not required, or that other subsection D sort of related with the attendant, wait staff, or server? Okay, I am not seeing anything. Jeff, can you confirm, is there anything we're missing in the chat that we should read out?
No, there's nothing new in the chat.
Okay, I will move then to the next subsection F, which is that the same food service offered inside the licensed premises must also be offered in the outdoor alcohol service area. So please raise your hand if you have thoughts on this. Okay, I am not seeing anything on my end, so I'll go ahead and go to G. And if we're moving too quick and you still want to contribute something on F, go ahead and still keep those comments coming. But subsection G also says the outdoor alcohol service area must be enclosed with a permanent or movable barrier, a minimum of 42 inches in height. The board may grant limited exceptions to the required 42-inch high barrier for outdoor alcohol service areas if the licensee has permanent boundaries for the outdoor alcohol service area. And this is something that's similar to what's in the current outdoor alcohol service area rules. So the 42-inch height is not new. If folks have feedback on this, please go ahead and raise your hand, share what you like, dislike. Okay, I see Roger, your hand is up, so go ahead and you can unmute yourself.
Right. I can understand where this might apply to an urban restaurant service area that is between buildings, has a sidewalk out in front, and you would need a 42-inch barrier to demarcate your particular property and service area. However, at a winery, you do not have barriers like that. You simply have an outdoor seating area that is open to the air, and vineyard or whatever else is around it. This doesn't, a 42-inch barrier doesn't make any sense at a winery.
Okay, thanks for that feedback, Roger. Is there a a suggestion you have for changing it? It does say the board may grant limited exceptions if the licensee has permanent boundaries. So that is in there currently.
Right. We have a 10-acre property, so we do have permanent boundaries for sure. But this seems to apply to an urban setting, not a winery in the country, in the hinterland.
Okay. Okay. So maybe you'd like to see something different for different settings, urban versus.
Or perhaps it would make more sense if you just specifically said for urban settings, a removable barrier, a minimum of 42 inches in height, would be appropriate.
Okay. Thanks for that feedback. Anything else you want to add?
No, that's it.
Okay. Thanks, Roger. Let's go to our next person here. I think we have, it looks like Russ Heaton. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Unmute.
We can hear you.
Yes, I know there are municipalities who are experimenting with demarcations on the ground to open up streetscapes so it's not so hodgepodgey with the 42-inch barriers. I think of McMinimans in Tacoma currently has sticker demarcations on the ground that allow egress between their building to the public and to the alcohol service across the sidewalk and down some public stairs. I think the Liquor Control Board should be looking at making that the rules as opposed to the exception in terms of a 42-inch barrier that for outdoor seating specifically. Indoor seating I'm not so concerned about, but for outdoor in terms of streetscape and ability for people with wheelchairs, people with visually impaired, the ability to navigate a sidewalk that is cut up and chopped up with 42-inch barriers makes it very difficult and unsightly. So I think that the idea of demarcation stickers that I believe Spokane and Seattle both have exploratory, and I think Tacoma has exploratory procedures in place to allow them. But I think that should be something that the state should look going as a whole.
Thank you, Russ. That I think we can revisit your comment when we go to our section on the public spaces. We're still on the private spaces one, but does your comment also apply to the like a restaurant that's doing it on a private space or any other kind of licensee that's?
Yeah, it's ostensibly it could be the public or private space outdoors in terms of the 42-inch barrier does not somehow magically prevent anything from occurring. I know that they had to come up with something, but much like I believe with Roger and his winery, to stretch a barrier across a parking lot as opposed to denoting it with a stripe does not make much difference to you're still going to be controlling your space.
Okay, thanks for that, Russ. Making a note of that. Is there anything else you want to add?
Nope, I will take my hand down.
Okay, thank you very much. And next we have Josh McDonald. So go ahead and unmute yourself, Josh.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Just for other people too, my mute and unmute changed and where I can find it. Now it's up in the kind of more up top right, just for any other versus a pop-up that came out to me. So on this section, I just want to comment for the Washington wine industry that this is going to be very popular. It's you write granted limited exceptions, but it's for your team and for everybody. This is a really big part of this rulemaking for us. we're moving into more settings where we want to utilize our outdoor spaces and be able to use these demarcations or other ways that I think are more modern and are less obstructive or obtuse or other ways to make sure we demarcate where our outdoor alcohol space is, but also a lot of times whether it's, I know where this originally came from was ADA issues and other ways. We're using public sidewalks and being able to make sure we can give the ability for restaurants to do that at the time many years ago when it was created, while also being able to, like downtown Seattle, still be able to comply with ADA requirements and other things. So now that we're going more modern with this, I just want to be clear that this is going to be very popular, and I would agree with what Russ said and others that we should. Your team may be being asked quite a bit to work with a licensee on the something other than the 42-inch barriers, some sort of demarcations as we see in many cities now. So if we need to rework this section to make that more clear, then that's going to be more likely how licensees interact with you with their outdoor seating versus asking how we do physical barriers of 42 inches. I highly recommend that, and happy to work with you, Audrey, and your team on what that language might look like. But I know from many of my wineries I talked to the past year and through the pandemic is they want to keep their outdoor spaces, and they want to be able to demarcate them in a way that's really easy to do and cost effective, and still make sure that enforcement can know where our outdoor licensed space is located. And I'll just mention also, I think it's important, I think Roger mentioned about his larger space. There are allowances in current rule for wineries to have picnic areas next to their wineries, and I'm happy to talk about that detail offline here. But for this space right now, I just wanted to make that comment and be clear that I think you're going to have a lot of interest on the exception or to this to a permanent barrier.
Thanks for that feedback, Josh. It looks like we also got a comment in the chat that's on this subject. Jeff, if you wouldn't mind just reading that out, if it's related.
Sure. We have two comments in the chat. And the first is from Jamie, and the comment reads, stanchions are typically 32 inches or 40 inches, not 42 inches. So if people need to use those, I suggest being more lenient and lower the height required. And we have another comment from Ken Rogers, and his comment is, would like to offer support for the previous commenter on the ability to meet observation requirements on outdoor service area to be met using video surveillance.
Okay, thank you both for that feedback. And thanks, Jeff, for reading that out loud. I'm not seeing any other hands up right now on this one, so I will scroll to the next subsection here, which is that openings into and out of the outdoor alcohol service area cannot exceed 10 feet. If there is more than one opening along one side, the total combined opening may not exceed 10 feet. And again, that's not new. That's something that's carried over from the current permanent rules. So I'm opening that one up for feedback, what you like, don't like, suggestions for changes. Okay, not seeing anything yet, so I'll just also read this next subsection, which is just a general, licensees must comply with local building codes, local health jurisdiction requirements, Department of Labor and Industries requirements, and any other applicable laws and rules. So just, a reminder here that there's other requirements beyond what the liquor rules are. So if there's any feedback on that or the previous subsection, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. If I'm moving too quick, raise your hand, we'll come back. We can go back up, but I do want to get to this public spaces subsection. So there's, similarities between what we just went through with the private spaces, but there's some differences for the public spaces. So for ongoing outdoor alcohol service located in public spaces, a licensee must request approval from the board's licensing division and meet the following requirements. So this first one, a license sub A, a licensed business must have a permit from their local jurisdiction, allowing the business to use the public space as a service area, such as a sidewalk cafe permit or other similar outdoor area permit authorized by local regulation. So we've heard some examples about what City of Seattle allows and other cities, and so that would be, something the local authority would issue. Is there any feedback on subsection A? Okay, I'll move on then to sub B. Or sorry, Jeff, was there something in the chat that I overlooked?
Yeah, I was just going to read this comment from Ken Rogers. And the comment is, it would be useful to restate the requirement to include clarification on total perimeter openings apply. Not clear that the requirement applies per side.
Okay. I think that was in reference back to that 10-foot sub H openings cannot exceed 10 feet. So I will take a look at that comment and we'll make a note of that and consider how we can make that clearer there. Okay, so going on to back to where we were in the public spaces sections. So again, the sidewalk cafe type of deals. Sub B, the licensee must have a building with indoor dining capacity. Okay, so this is similar to what we read above, and in order to qualify for an outdoor alcohol service area. Building is defined in that other WAC listed there. It must have floor to ceiling walls and a roof, comply with state and local building codes. So I'm assuming there's probably a lot of similar feedback to what we received already, but if there's anything new or additional you want to add on the this piece, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. You don't have to repeat everything you said before if it's the same, but do let us know if you want to add anything. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, but Jeff, raise your hand or jump in if you see something that you want me to pause so we can read that. But the next subsection is about the 42-inch barriers. So sub C, except as provided in subsection 2 of this section, the outdoor alcohol service area must be enclosed with a permanent or movable barrier, a minimum of 42 inches in height. Openings into and out of the service area cannot exceed 10 feet. If there is more than one opening along one side, the total opening may not exceed 10 feet. And this is so sub 2 now, this is the exception that was referenced above. So an exception to the 42-inch high barrier requirement for the public spaces. Licensees with outdoor alcohol service areas contiguous to the licensed premises may use a permanent demarcation of the designated alcohol service area for continued enforcement of the boundaries instead of a permanent or movable barrier, a minimum of 42 inches in height. If a permanent demarcation is used, the demarcation must be at all boundaries of the outdoor alcohol service area, must be at least 6 inches in diameter, and must be placed no more than 10 feet apart. So this is carrying over that existing exception some folks were referencing earlier about the demarcation option on the public sidewalks in areas like that. So is there any feedback on this portion of the rules? Okay, I see Ken Rogers has their hand raised, so go ahead, Ken. You should have the option to unmute yourself. So
Okay.
Ken, go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry. It looks like Ken put his question into the comments. His question is, must those 6-inch diameter be connected in some way, or may space between?
Was that the whole question there? Okay.
And he said, sorry, he's unable to unmute.
Okay. If I'm understanding right, I think your question might be answered by this sentence here where it says they must be placed no more than 10 feet apart. So that would be the maximum spacing between them. And if I'm misunderstanding that question, or you have something else you want to add, put that in the chat too. And if anyone, or let me know if that answers it or not. Or okay, John, are you about to jump in?
Yeah, Audrey,
Okay.
I was just going to say, I think that what this is referencing, and something that is often confused, even sometimes internally, is the use of the word demarcation, which we have universally come to mean something on the ground. So 6-inch diameter dots or turtles or something like that. So the answer to the question, Mr. Rogers' question, would be no, they're not connected.
Okay, thanks for that, John. Hopefully that covers your question, Ken. And if you have other specific, was there something else that came in the chat? I saw something pop up briefly. Jeff, do you mind reading that?
Sure. There's a follow-up question. Do individual posts meet the requirement, or do the posts need a fence?
So under these rules, it doesn't get into the specificity of, to answer your questions. That might be more of a question for licensing, again, on a case-by-case situation where they work with folks. But I don't know if you have something you want to add, John, or, if we need to clarify something in the rule too to make this clearer, we can certainly consider that.
Yeah, I'm assuming that here, if you mean that there's a stanchion or a post of some kind that you're using to create a boundary, that yes, you would connect it with a rope or something to connect the two posts together. If this were a situation where demarcations were approved and they were on the ground, then no, there wouldn't be a connection. But yeah, ropes, chains, wood, sometimes people do build fences or even use planters.
So it sounds like those would all be options, just depending on what the situation was here, what you were approved for. But in this case, the rule about the permanent demarcations for the public spaces is about, John was saying, those markings on the ground. So I think we got a recommendation in the chat to recommend language to clarify requirements between posts. Okay, thanks, Ken, for that feedback. Let me see if anyone else has their hand up. I'm not seeing anything, so I will, Jeff, raise your hand if I missed something, and I will let you read that out. But seeing nothing, I'll move to subsection D. So this is similar to what we saw above. The outdoor alcohol service area must have an attendant, waitstaff, or server dedicated to the area when patrons are present. So maybe this is the same feedback that folks offered before. But if you have something new, please raise your hand. This is for the public spaces section. These next 3 subsections are actually ones that we looked at above too. Same food service offered inside the licensed premises must also be offered in the outdoor alcohol service area, and the reminder to comply with local building codes, local health jurisdiction requirements, and other applicable laws and rules. So if anyone has feedback on subsections D, E, or F, please go ahead and raise your hand or put them in the chat. Okay, go ahead, Jeff, and read out. I think Ken put another comment in.
Yes, the comment is, encourage language to allow for video surveillance to meet the requirement.
Okay, I think that's referring to the attendant, wait staff, or server dedicated to the area section. If that's not right, Ken, let me know, but I think you're referring to that one. Okay, so Ken said that's correct. So that feedback's in connection with subsection D. And is there anything else we are missing in the chat on D, E, or F? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. So I will scroll down to subsection 4. For multiple licensees to share an outdoor alcohol service area, the licensees must request approval from the licensing division, meet the following requirements. Jeff, I see your hands up, so I'll pause for a second.
Yes, we have a question from Emily Gantt, and the question is, the LCB has not historically required things like certificates of occupancy or health-related permits. Would this remain true under the new language on building codes, etc.?
So let me scroll. Thanks for that question, Emily. So it's not saying in the rule that you have to submit that stuff necessarily with the licensing application, although, I'm not familiar with what's all currently in the applications, and that might be something licensing can jump in on again. But the rule is not imposing like a new requirement here, just reminding folks that there are other rules out there that are from the local authority or from other departments that would apply. So
if I could speak briefly.
Oh, go ahead, John. Yeah.
We added this in here just because, we're very aware of the desire to have extensive outside areas. However, some of the proposals that we've seen and even some of the construction that we've seen may not exactly look sturdy, if that's one way to put it. So we were simply tossing around how we could assure that people were, in the case of outside areas, building structures that were safe.
Well, thank you for that question, Emily, and John for jumping in there, and all of our licensing team responding to folks. Appreciate that. I'll go back down to our shared areas now, unless, Jeff, is there something else we need to cover?
Yes, we had a response from Beth, and she replied to Emily, no, Emily, we would not change what we are doing now. And Emily replied, thank you, that's helpful information.
Okay. Thank you for reading that one out. And if anyone has feedback on this subsection 4, please raise your hand and let me know. The first piece here is The licensee's property, parcels, or buildings must be located in direct physical proximity to one another. And in this case, direct physical proximity means the property, parcels, or buildings are physically connected or touching each other along a boundary or point. And this is for the shared outdoor areas. Okay, so I will move on to sub B. I'm not seeing any hands up. Again, we can always go back if we're going too quick. So B says if the shared outdoor alcohol service area is located on public space, the licensee sharing the space must meet all the requirements that we just covered in sub 3, and the shared use of that outdoor area has to be authorized by the licensee's local jurisdiction permits. So and sub 2 here covers the privately owned space scenario. So again, if you are the licensee sharing an outdoor space, have to meet all the requirements in sub 2 that we covered earlier, and must have legal authority to share use of that outdoor area. So this is B is referencing back essentially to the requirements we covered already. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, this is a comment from Brandon's staff, or a question. Is there a limit to how many shared spaces can be combined?
Thanks for that question, Brandon. So the rules, the limit here is that they're physically connected, that the property, parcels, or buildings are physically connected or touching each other along a boundary or at a point. So other than that, there's not a limit. But we'll get into more of the requirements below for what else has to be met. But in terms of how many, that's limited by the physical connections here. Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
And Brandon replied, thank you.
Okay, so thanks for that feedback, and we'll go on to sub C, which is the licensees must maintain separate storage of products and separate financial records for the shared outdoor alcohol service area. If licensees share any point of sale system, licensees must keep complete documentation and records for the shared point of sale system showing clear separation as to what sales items and categories belong to each respective licensee. So this is just for those shared areas again. So if anyone has feedback on this, please go ahead and raise your hand or put it in the chat. And I'll also scroll on to the next one down here because I'm not seeing anything popping up. So the next one says licensees must use distinctly marked glassware or serving containers in the shared outdoor alcohol service area to identify the source of any alcohol product being consumed. The distinctive markings may be either permanent or temporary. Any temporary markings must remain on the glassware or serving containers through the duration of use by the customer. So in these shared spaces, this is a serving container glassware requirement. Doesn't apply if if it's not a shared space. Does anyone have feedback on this section? Okay, I'm not seeing anything on my end, and Jeff, jump in if I'm missing something, but I didn't see anything in the chat either. So I will go ahead and move on to E. Sub E says, the licensees must complete an operating plan for the shared outdoor alcohol service area. The operating plan should demonstrate, in general, how responsibility is shared among the licensees. Licensees are required to submit the operating plan to the licensing division at the time of application or alteration and must keep documentation of an up-to-date plan available for inspection on the premises. So yeah, for folks that are sharing those areas, an operating plan will be required. So I'm not seeing any hands at this point either. I hope I'm not moving too quickly. Folks, if I am, just we can go back to ones above, two that you wanted to speak on. But I'm not seeing anything at this point. And Jeff, again, jump in if I'm missing something, but I'll also just read out F right now, which says consistent with WAC 314.11.065, a licensee may not permit the removal of alcohol in an open container from the shared outdoor alcohol service area, except to re-enter the licensed premises where the alcohol was purchased. Signage prohibiting the removal of alcohol in an open container must be visible to patrons in the shared outdoor alcohol service area. So that references an existing WAC that relates to the removal of the alcohol from service areas. So that is all for the shared section. If anyone has general feedback on the shared section, feel free to raise your hand now, because the next, well, I guess I'll also just note this next piece is related to the shared section. I guess I spoke too soon, but it says all participating licensees are jointly responsible for any violation or enforcement issues, unless it can be demonstrated that the violation or enforcement issue was due to one or more licensees' specific conduct or action, in which case it applies only to that identified licensee. So that's also tied in, just the liability piece there, or the enforcement piece there. So I see we have one hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Roger.
Okay, and this is kind of a hypothetical. I kind of know some instances in Oregon where this would exist. Let's say you have multiple tasting rooms that are located in one building. Let's say there are four wineries that have distinct spaces in a building, but then outside of that building, they have an area maybe 30 by 30 or 20 by 25, whatever. And a person can take their glass of wine or even taste or a bottle or something and go in and sit on this deck or something. Does this really cover a situation or allow for a situation like that? And I'm looking at where you talk about an operating plan for the outdoor seating area. Would it be okay to have a shared seating area for the four different tasting rooms?
Thanks for the question, Roger. So I think, I mean, if I'm understanding, it's an outdoor area, right? So these rules would apply. If we're talking about indoor shared areas, that's covered under different existing rules for tasting rooms. But yeah, in this case, for the outdoor portions.
And I suppose this is really a question for the licensing, but I'm not sure how it applies with your language. And I'm just saying that, would it be possible for these four tasting rooms to have one shared outdoor tasting area?
So I think to answer that, it would just depend on, do they meet all the requirements we just kind of went over? And I guess, are they contiguous, connected, etc. So hopefully that helps. If you think in that scenario there's something that wouldn't fit in there that you'd kind of want to see changed, let us know what that component is. If there's a suggestion you have for changing one of these, but yeah.
I think the license or the language is appropriate, but in a situation where they would not have distinct outdoor areas, but would have a shared outdoor space, would that be approved? Would that kind of a plan be approved? And I don't know who determines that.
Yeah, so I think it
Audrey.
would just kind of depend on the criteria and the rules, and they'd evaluate the application. But it looks like John from our licensing division has something he wants to add. So go ahead, John.
It sounds like it would. Again, always difficult to do without looking at something. So this wording was largely borrowed from what came out in the Distillers Bill a couple of years ago that originally opened the door for shared outdoor areas. And I noticed that somebody asked about the staffing question. I believe that those rules, and I'll have to look, do require shared staffing so that essentially one entity wasn't just doing all the staffing, but that it was truly a collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I guess, again, this is kind of a hypothetical thing, but I could see where this coming up in the future, if it isn't already somewhere.
Well, and feel free to always email licensing with any of those theoreticals, and we'd be happy to entertain them.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Roger. We appreciate that. And John, thanks for hopping in. And if you think of later, Roger, some language that you think needs to go in to help clarify, please do send that on to the rules email as well, rules@lcb.wa.gov. And I will go ahead and, Jeff, if you want to read out whatever the comment that came in was, go ahead.
Sure. This is a question from Megan Moore. Does each licensee need to maintain a staff member at all times? My hope is that the licensees each have a dedicated staff member in the shared area.
So thanks for that question, Megan. I'm just scrolling back through these to find the portion where talks about the staffing. So let me just scroll through here, because I think there is something in here about, right. So the operating plan would have to include how they're sharing that responsibility. So under the current draft, at least, the idea is the operating plan would demonstrate how they're sharing that staffing, and that would be up to the businesses that are operating that shared space. Does that answer the question, Megan? Or if you think there needs to be something additional added, let us know. But at this point, yeah, it would be a business decision based on what they put in the operating plan, which is subject to approval by the licensing division. So I see we have a couple more comments that have come in, and after we read out those comments, all we have left is the definition section, and then we'll go to our short break. So go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, this is a comment from Stacy Auckland. I'd like to suggest requiring video cameras in the shared areas.
Okay, thanks for that feedback, Stacy. And if you want to speak more to that, or kind of the reasons behind that suggestion, please go ahead and raise your hand, and we can try and unmute you, or if your unmute isn't working, we'll read out whatever additional info you put in there. So I'll give you a moment to do that. And then I just wanted to point out this last definition subsection. So we, define what contiguous means, touching along a boundary or at a point. Sidewalk cafe means a designated seating area on the sidewalk, curb space, or other public space where business provides table service and seating during business hours. And then just subsection 7 includes that expiration, because this is a temporary section based on House Bill 1480. So it expires July 1, 2023, unless it's extended. So if anyone has feedback on those definitions, additional feedback on the rest of this section, that does wrap up the outdoor service areas. So it is 2:36, and looking at our agenda, we're right on our break time. But Jeff, before we take that break, can you let me know if you're seeing anything in the chat we need to revisit?
No, I don't see anything else in the chat right now.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for your feedback on this first half, and we will come back at 2:40 and begin on the food service menu requirements. And we can also, I think I just saw a comment come in. We can read that out when we get back from the break. So thanks everyone, and see you in a couple minutes here. Well, welcome back everyone. It is 2:40, so we'll go ahead and get started. And I think we'll begin with just kind of going back and reading out the last comment that came in. So go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Audrey. This is regarding Stacy Auckland's last comment regarding video cameras in shared areas. Stacy says, it could help licensees know if there's an issue and they can handle it quickly. And WLCB could use the video too if there's a reported issue.
Okay, thanks for that feedback, Stacy, and that helps us understand the previous suggestion to require video cameras. So with that, I'm not seeing anything else in the chat on the outdoor service area, so we'll move on to our food service menu requirement section. And we'll start with the definition section. These times here are just suggested. I imagine it'll take us longer to get through the definition section, which is why I think it may take us 30 minutes, and the other ones are going to be much shorter because the changes are less in each of these other sections. So we do have scheduled until around 3:40 to so another hour to get through this, but if we end early, we may end early if there's not a whole lot of feedback. So let's jump right into the food service definitions. So just, I guess, let me back up too and just say, again, the reason we're looking at these is because House Bill 1480 had a requirement that the board must consider revising current rules in order to provide greater flexibility regarding food service menu requirements for licensees. So, this is the reason we're looking into examining these. We want to provide greater flexibility for folks. So let me just turn back to our definitions here. So this first change that you see is just a technical change, revising that intro portion. And these are existing definitions. So for those who might be new to the rule drafting style, the stuff that is underlined is new, and the stuff that's in the strike throughs with the double parens around it is current language that we are proposing to, suggesting to remove. So if we look at these definitions, these are the definition of appetizer was in here before. We're suggesting to, in the draft, remove it, and because it's not used anymore with the edits that we're making. And then we are bringing in a definition for a complete meal. This used to be defined within the spirit, beer, wine, restaurant food requirement section, but we thought it would make more sense to bring it out into the full definition section instead. So now in our draft, it says complete meal means an entree with at least one side dish available to order. Side dishes must be offered and available to order with the entree, but are not required to be included. Or 2, complete meal means a combination of small plates that are intended to be ordered many at a time or on a rolling basis throughout the meal service. I'm just going to go through the whole definition in complete meal, and then we can come back, and if anyone has feedback on this, please raise your hand. Let us know what you like and don't like. The next piece here is that menu items that consist solely of the following types of food do not qualify as complete meals. This is pre-cooked frozen food that is reheated, carry-out items obtained from another business, or snack food. And snack food is defined later. That's something that was in the rules, but we're bringing these out into the definition section now. So that's why it looks like it's all new underlined text. And then we have some definitions here of what the word entree means, what the word side dish means, what the word small plate means. So I will open that up for feedback. These definitions of entree, again, are taken from our existing rule, but we did add in some new examples that take in more types of food, more cultures in here. So like the tikka masala, the fufu, the curry, and then in side dish, this long list was also included in the previous rule. We now have irio, banchan, couscous, other similar dishes. And with small plate, this is the new option we have a type of menu item that has a small portion size and is intended to be ordered many at a time or on a rolling basis throughout the meal service, excuse me. Small plates are often shared among guests. Some examples of small plates include, but are not limited to, tapas, dim sum, and meze. So many cultures have different types of small plates. This does not include snack food. So I'll pause there and see if, Jeff, is there anything coming in the chat, or do you see any hands? I'm not seeing any on my end.
No, I don't. Oh, there is a question now in the chat that just popped up. And this is a question from Ken Rogers. Does the distinction between spirits, beer, wine restaurant, and just beer, wine restaurant licensee, no spirits, in parentheses, remain in the proposed changes? If so, are there any proposed changes to the food requirements for beer, wine licensees?
So thanks for that question, Ken. Yeah, we'll get to the definition of minimum food service next, which is what applies to the beer, wine restaurants. So yeah, complete meal is something that's for the spirit, beer, wine restaurants and certain other licensees that, were previously grouped under the complete meal requirement. And then the beer, wine is the minimum food service requirement. So that's separate. Did we get another question in, Jeff?
Yes, there's a question from Megan Moore. Clarifying question. Does this definition section also apply to the cocktails to go / delivery draft rules?
So thanks for that question, Megan. Yeah, these are part of the same rule set as the cocktails to go delivery the other alcohol to go endorsement rules. These definitions were cross-referenced in the cocktail to go section. So the answer to your question is yes on that. Okay, so I am not seeing any other hands at this point. So maybe what I'll do is I'll go down to the next definition change, and we can maybe, Ken, you can ask your question at that point, or it'll make more sense once we see the other changes. I apologize for all the scrolling. Definition sections can be kind of long sometimes, so we are removing in the draft, we're suggesting to remove the definition of limited food service and merge that in with minimum food service since they were so similar before. That's why that's going away. And then here's the definition of minimum food service. So this is for the beer, wine restaurants as well as the other types of licensees that previously referenced minimum food service. And now also the limited food service references are grouped in here. So minimum food service means that menu items such as sandwiches, salad, soup, pizza, hamburgers, fries, savory pies, tacos, dumplings, fried rice, and other similar items are available to order. Menu items that consist solely of the following types of food do not qualify as minimum food service. So that's the pre-cooked frozen food that's reheated, carry-out items obtained from another business, or snack food. And then just so we can kind of get to the next, this is the only other definition here that changed. Snack food includes items such as peanuts, popcorn, chips, jerky, candy, cookies, crackers, edamame, and other similar food items. So we're trying to broaden these lists out a bit to be more inclusive here of more possible types of food. So if anyone has feedback on any of the definitions that we've just looked at, the three that were changed again are complete meal, minimum food service, and snack food. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the comments or hands raised, so feel free to raise your hand later if something occurs to you on these definitions. But with that, I guess I'll go into our next section, which is food service requirements for the spirit beer wine restaurant license. So previously, well, I guess let me start with the caption. You'll notice throughout this rule set, we're just doing some technical revisions to clean up our captions. Instead of phrasing them like questions, we are changing them to be just statements. So you'll notice that throughout here. And then the substantive change here is in the first sentence. A spirit beer wine restaurant license must serve at least 4 complete meals instead of the previously it was 8. And then you can see what we did was remove those definitions of complete meal, entree, etc., side dish, and cross-reference the new definition in the wax section. So I will stop there. I see we have a comment in the chat, so go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. Question from Ken Rogers, or suggestion is, if reheated frozen food meets the requirements, then I suggest modification to allow reheated frozen food.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for that suggestion, Ken. I'm just trying to read your comment now to see if I understand it. If you're able to maybe to speak on that a little more, I'm not sure I'm fully getting which requirement you're referencing for the first part, because it does specifically say in the rule that the reheated frozen food is not included in that. So are you able to unmute yourself and speak to that a little bit, Ken, so I can kind of understand? Okay, I apologize. I forgot you didn't have unmuting as an option. So it looks like Ken says it's under the prior section. Right. Okay, so maybe the suggestion here, Ken, is you want to change that requirement that says that the reheated frozen foods aren't allowed. That was back up in the definition for both minimum food service and complete meal, and that was something we took from a section below that we'll get to, but an existing requirement. But so okay, I hear that. I'll make a note of that. Is there anything else we're missing in the chat or any other hands that are up, Jeff?
No, I don't see anything else.
Okay, just making a note there. Let me scroll back down to where we were at with the first section. So does anyone have feedback on the change from 8 to 4 complete meals, or anything else in this section? I'm just quickly scrolling through to show you all what else is in here. The reference to limited food service is removed, and that was consolidated with the minimum food service. So we're replacing that with a sentence that says minimum food service must be available during hours of alcohol service when complete meal service is not offered, then cross-referencing that new minimum food service definition. So, not a substantive change in my view, but if folks have feedback on that, please raise your hand and let me know. That's the entire spirit beer wine section. Okay, so the next, I'm not seeing anything, so I'll go to the next section, which is food service requirements for a hotel license. And the reason we're modifying this as well is to be consistent with the, the change for the spirit beer wine folks. That's from went from 8 to 4 again. So a hotel licensee must have the ability to serve at least 4 complete meals to hotel guests instead of 8. Just adding that new definition reference in. And then adding in the reference to minimum food service here so we don't have to keep repeating it. And that's all for the hotel license section. So that same change from 8 down to 4 complete meals required. Are there any thoughts or feedback on this? Please go ahead and raise your hand. Okay. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, another comment from Ken Rogers. Sorry to re-ask, but I haven't seen it so far. Are there distinctions between food service requirements between spirits, beer, and wine, and just beer wine licensees?
Yeah, not a problem to ask again, Ken. So the way the WAC here is set up is it has, or the rules are set up is that it has, different, the food requirements are embedded in each of these different license types, which is why we're kind of going in and going through. We started with the spirit beer wine restaurant, now then we went to hotel, and now we're on snack bar. So the beer wine restaurant license, I actually don't think we had to amend it in here because it still references food service requirements, minimum food service requirements, excuse me. So we didn't have to make a change to it for that change to apply. But when we looked at that definition change, that would apply to those folks. So maybe someone from licensing could just put in the chat what that WAC number is. I don't know on the top of my head, but for the beer wine restaurant licensees where it says they have to have minimum food service, and that might help kind of explain. We aren't going to look at that today, but it already says it in there basically, Ken. So I hope that helps answer your question. And I will look up that WAC later too if it's not in the chat, and I can reach out to you and kind of. So it looks like Ken says no change in the proposal from follow-up question. No change in the proposal from existing. Well, so the change is that what we already covered with the definition of minimum food service. So the change is adding in those new, here I'll pause and go back up and look at the minimum food service definition. So this applies to the beer wine restaurant licensees. So now we've added things in like savory pies, tacos, and dumplings. So that's the change. Okay, and I see we have another comment in the chat. Jeff, if you don't mind reading that out.
Okay, it's a question from Stacy Auckland. Previous section, I saw 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. for food service, which leads me to ask, is there a time when alcohol can be served? Can alcohol be served from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. also?
So thanks for that question, Stacy. We aren't changing whatever the existing requirement is in rule, and I don't know what that existing requirement is on the top of my head. So if we do have enforcement staff or licensing staff on the line that can help answer what the what the existing hour requirements are, that would be helpful. But just know we aren't changing them in the rule here. We're just focused on the food service requirements. So I apologize, I'm not able to answer that one on the top of my head. I do see we have more comments coming in. I don't think we have to read them all out loud, but licensing staff has provided the citation for the beer wine restaurant license, WAC 314-02045. And the answer to Stacy's question, yes, you can serve alcohol as long as you have some sort of food service from our licensing staff. And I think that covers what we've got in the comments so far. Am I missing anything, Jeff? Oh, we've got, I apologize. Beth, your hand is up. Let me unmute you. And if you want to introduce yourself too. Oh, I lost you on there. Let me apologize, folks, having trouble unmuting. Okay, you should have the option to unmute yourself now, Beth.
Thank you, Audrey. I actually already answered. I forgot to take my hand down. I already answered in chat. But yeah, you can serve alcohol. Alcohol service in Washington is from 6 a.m. until 2 a.m. If you have a restaurant and you're serving alcohol, we require that you serve your full menu at least 5 hours a day. The rest of the time you have to serve at least minimal food if you want to continue serving alcohol. Hope that helped.
Thank you very much, Beth. And Stacy, if you have additional thoughts, if you're able to, I see Stacy put that, yes, thank you. So.
And sorry, Beth Lehman, Customer Service Manager, Licensing. Late, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing anything new or new hands, so I'm going to go head to our snack bar license type here. And this is really a very minor change. We're just, because the numbering changed in our definitions, we are making a technical revision here. It's no longer subsection 15. So if anyone has feedback on that, let me know, but that was pretty minor. So I will go on to our Spirit Beer Wine Theater license. And the reason we have to amend this one, it's not that we're trying to make a, change just to clean it up, just like we did the other ones with, it used to have all the things in here embedded about 8 complete meals, complete meal, entree, etc. So now we're replacing that with just a shorter sentence. These licensees must meet the same food service requirements that apply to spirit beer wine restaurant licensees. So shortening that down, not intended to be a substantive change. If you have feedback on that, please let us know. And I'm going to continue scrolling. Apologize for all the scrolling. It's a long section, and this is all, again, this is existing language. We're not making changes in here. The changes would be shown by underlines and strike throughs. So the next section that we do change is the caterer's license. And that used to have references to the 8 complete meals, which we've reduced now to 4. So we're doing that again here. And then used to contain definitions of complete meal, entree, etc. Now we're just wrapping that all up into one, putting the cross-reference in. And then the minimum food service reference. So that is another cross-reference added there. And we have just some renumbering going on. So that's what's happening in here. Let me pause. I see we had a comment come in. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, yeah, we have a question from Jessica Martin, and the question is, what does must have the ability mean?
Thank you, Jessica, for that question. Let me see if I can find what you might be talking about here. I think is that in one of the definitions for, let me just search that. And yeah, so this might be what you're referring to. The language about the spirit beer wine caterer license. And it appears, kind of in multiple times throughout the rule. So, yeah, we're not changing that, but they have to be able to serve 4 complete meals. I guess if you want to unmute yourself, let me unmute you so you can kind of explain a little more. Okay. If you'd like to speak on that a little bit, you should have the ability to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I work in the food safety program for Spokane Regional Health District, and we have a lot of applicants coming in that tell me, they're applying for a food permit, but they give us kind of wishy-washy food preparation steps because they say they don't actually have to have the food, they just have to have the ability to make the food. And so there's been a lot of confusion this year surrounding that. And so it's like, do they need to have the food or not have the food is the question.
Audrey?
Yeah, go ahead, Beth. Yes, please.
So with the caterer's license, you have to have food. You have to be able to make food. It's a requirement of the license. The ability part comes in because you don't always have to serve food if you get hired for a catering event. So if they want you to just do the alcohol, that's fine. But with that license, you have to show us that you do have a menu. And if someone were to ask you to do the food, that you could do that.
Okay. So, yeah, we've had a few this summer that have had a lot of confusion around that word ability. So I just wanted to let you know that.
No, John, you want to speak now?
Well, I'd just like to state that we're very aware of, of this misinterpretation and the proliferation of caterers who feel like they can just provide alcohol and not provide food.
Okay, thank you so much, because that is what's happening.
Well, thanks for that question, Jessica and John and Beth. And, you can always feel free to connect with, the licensing team or myself, the rules team outside of this too, if you have additional, questions specific to what's going on in your situation. But yeah, it's something we're not changing in this rule set. Since the focus was to provide more flexibility for the 1480 purposes, but certainly good context to have. So appreciate that. So let me just go back to where we were before, which was below. We were on the we passed the Spirit Beer Wine Theater. We're down on the next section, I believe, which is the caterer's license. So apologies for the scrolling again, folks. So I think I already talked about this, but yeah, we're just making that change about the 8 to 4 and those cross references and doing some renumbering. So yeah, some renumbering going on in here just to make sure each of these paragraphs has a number to it. And then, so that's just a technical change, not a substantive one. And then down here, this is the last part of our rules today that we'll look at. The senior center license, same type of changes we saw above. this is one of those that previously had a reference to limited food service, and now we've gotten rid of that definition. So we're replacing it with the minimum food service requirement. So that was something we looked at above already. So that's all of the changes. So if folks have general feedback on the food service changes, go ahead and raise your hand. We can go back to any of the ones we just looked at, or again, if it's just a general thing too, feel free to offer that now, language that you like, don't like, what you want to see differently, or if there's final questions folks have. So I'm going to take a look at our comments and see what's come in. Not seeing anything new. Not seeing any hands. Okay, I do see one hand now. Go ahead, Roger.
Okay, so I understand all the food service requirements for the various food type establishments and how they're defined. Are there any food requirements for wineries that just have a winery or brewery or distillery license?
Though, yeah, no, there aren't. Thanks for that question, Roger. That's not, as far as I'm aware, they're not subject to, the changes that we've brought in here. There's separate stuff for wineries, and I don't know if licensing wants to jump in on. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
But one point a year probably else is, when COVID hit and we were starting to go to outdoor stuff and different rules are coming in. I think there was a period when they said that wineries had to provide some kind of food. In fact, they had to have a menu, and we haven't had that posted. And then we had to list, if we didn't have something, we had to list other restaurants in the area. And it was I guess maybe a little bit too many requirements, but apparently that's been waived or dropped.
Yeah, that was already dropped. This is Beth again. That was already dropped, and we're not changing any and imposing any food requirements for wineries at this time, no.
Okay, well, that's good. Good choice.
Thanks for that question, Roger and Beth, for hopping in. It looks like we do have Jeannie, if you want to introduce yourself, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeannie McShane. I'm the Deputy Director of Licensing. I just wanted to follow up with what Beth had to say. Those requirements for food for wineries and breweries, when we enacted those, it was so that they could continue to operate under the emergency guidelines of the governor. And since those have since gone away, then those requirements are no longer necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeannie. And again, thanks for that question, Roger. I'm not seeing any other hands at this point, but if there's something we want to go back to, even on the outdoor service piece, we are running quite ahead of schedule. So we do have time to touch on that on those topics if you want to. Otherwise, the next item on the agenda here is just to go to wrap up and next steps. So let me just check in with Jeff before I go to that wrap up. Are we seeing anything coming in, Jeff?
No, I don't see anything, Audrey.
Okay. So moving on to our wrap up and next steps. After today's meeting, I'll compile all the comments and feedback we got into a comment table, which will be shared out with the board and others, the public for review once we're closer to releasing the CR 102. That'll get published on our website, and we will put the recording from today's session up on our webpage as well. So if you go to lcb.wa.gov, you will find our rulemaking webpage has the recording from the first listen and learn, and it should have shortly the recording from this session. It may take a couple days to get put up online, though. Here's some resources for related to 1480. So you feel free to click through these. This PowerPoint will also be up on our webpage. Yep, so that's all I have. I want to thank everyone for attending today, and feel free to reach out directly to me at my email, my phone number, if you have follow-up questions or concerns about the rule draft or the rulemaking process. And you can also reach us, and I'll put this in the chat, at rules@lcb.wa.gov. So thanks, everyone. With that, I will end the recording and hope you all have a great rest of your day.